Right. All boys leave home someday. It said so on TV. Home. For some, that word elicits joy, nostalgia, longing. For some, dread and a pit in the bottom of the stomach, something they'd rather forget. For some, it feels a touch meaningless, perhaps. It's just a word, after all. See, for a long time, I've always looked forward to going back to my hometown, having spent the first 18 years of my life in the same house, the same town. Since then, I've moved and moved and moved and moved. So returning to a touch of familiarity and stability has always been something I've looked forward to. That is, of course, until very recently. For years, I've been asked if, given the opportunity, would I move back to my hometown? And for years, without hesitation, I would answer yes. My family and a good amount of my friends are there. I haven't forgotten what life was like back in those days. It was always my intention to one day return to my hometown. And then recently, I was asked that same question again. And I found myself actually debating it. Do I want to go home? And what even is home? There's an episode of a PBS kids show called Arthur that I was reminded of. It's a pretty good kids show. I still remember lines and references from the show years later. Without explaining too much, one character named Buster moves away at one point and is gone for quite some time. At some point he returns, and there's an interesting pair of episodes. One exploring the thoughts and feelings of someone, Arthur in this case, who remained home. And two, exploring the thoughts and feelings of someone, Buster, who's returned home. They're simplistic in portrayal and what events occur. Like in one scene, Buster is horrified to learn that Arthur now likes this show that they once both hated. Or how in Buster's absence, Arthur started doing activities with other people. And on Arthur's side, significant concerns that Buster is no longer the Buster he knew. I think it touches on some weird sense that isn't so easily described, not to mention the subconscious sense of drifting away from something, or someone, when not physically proximate. Those feelings of encountering a person from the past, and the weird blend of familiarity and distance that feels borderline uncomfortable. And while this distance is resolved easily enough for Arthur and Buster, I feel like most of the time, life isn't like that. I think I've actually found two words that would describe how I feel about the word home, from the Dictionary of Obscure Sorrows. Look-a-back. The shock of meeting back up with someone and learning that your mental image of them had fallen wildly out of date, having grown up or gotten old, fallen apart, or pulled themselves together. Which shakes your faith in the accuracy of the social puppet show that runs continuously inside your head. Mythenness. The unsettling awareness that the rest of the world happily carries on in your absence. That although things only seem to change when you check back in for an update, they're unwilling to wait for you, and undergo massive shifts while your back is turned. Your mother getting older, your old friends becoming different people, your hometown losing some of the hallmarks that made it feel like home. Look-a-back and mythenness are best felt and seen in the beginning segments of Night in the Woods, an adventure game, in which the main character, Mae Borowski, returns home from college. As the story unfolds, you learn more about her motives, her past, and the events that led to her return. But the first feeling that struck me was within the first few minutes of the game. Mae sees a piece of tourism advertising at the bus stop and remarks, "Wow, when did they put this up?" It struck a chord in me when her journal entry and drawing merely states that her father looks older. It continues, particularly in the small side conversations that Mae has with various townsfolk, all of whom have varying reactions to her return. These conversations range from speaking to her negligent parents about the events in town, to kids who don't remember her at all, To people with a vague recollection of May. To people who still remember her as a child. To people who don't know her personally, but remember what she did. To friends who largely seem to be the same. To relationships with great change. And to relationships with significant tension. Her mental image of what she was expecting in her return home is in both flux and stasis at the same time, evident by the journal entries that can be occasionally viewed. It seems that she's returning home with the expectations of things being just like old times. One could say she'd been drifting away for a while, but returning home dispelled any notion of things being just like old times. I had already felt and seen the dissonance, but perhaps nothing better summed up the end to May's idyllic return home than when she asked when they were going to play out, and her friend responded, "May, we don't play out. We have jobs now, May." Not too long ago, I went back home for the first time in 8 months. Due to a number of life circumstances, I hadn't been back at the normal times, like during holidays. So it was something I was very much looking forward to. It would be like old times, is what I somewhat anticipated. I'd see this person and that person, and go to visit some of the places I used to be in high school, and that image was shattered about an hour into my return, as I was scheduled to meet with one of my childhood friends I'd grown up with. And what I presumed was going to be a preliminary phone call, he revealed that 1, he was dating someone, and 2, she was going to be at lunch with us, and 3, there were a few others coming that I didn't know that well. I'd like to think that I held back my reaction to the moment fairly well, but what I didn't know is that the interaction would set the tone for the rest of the week. One of the most jarring moments that reminded me of how much time had really passed was when I met up with 2 of my old high school teachers to have lunch and play a board game. I've stayed in touch with the 2 of them since my graduation from high school. I think it's both simultaneously amazing that I've stayed in touch with them, and also somewhat disappointing that none of my peers stayed in touch with me. In a lot of ways, the 2 of them were key figures in my adolescent development and a lot of my favorite memories. We all used to play board games during lunches. As we talked, the conversation turned to their children. One starting middle school in the next year, another headed off to college. And it dawned on me in the middle of the conversation. 10 years ago, I changed the 2B middle school's diaper when I babysat him. And I don't normally feel old despite my reputation as an old soul, but realizing that certainly made me feel that way. So as the week continued, more than ever before, I found myself noticing all the things that had changed. A new neighborhood in development there, the exterior of a building remodeled to be modern, a tree that used to be there and is now just a stump, the emptiness of rooms I spent thousands of hours in, the reminiscing of memories long forgotten, and the reading of graduation notes in my yearbook from people who I once saw every day and hadn't talked to in years. The lines in my mother's face. Sometimes I would hear stories of people I considered an integral part of my childhood. Sometimes they'd talk about events and inside jokes that I wasn't around for. While it was great to spend time in the company of some of my friends during the week, I couldn't help but feel at the end of the week like I'd lost something, or that a part of me had been laid to rest, and that was the end of it. Recently, a metaphorical bow was tied on top of it, when my parents sent me a video of a dumpster they had rented to throw out old things in. I'm not really on social media. I don't really know what's going on in the lives of people unless I'm told, or they stay consistently in touch with me. I've certainly rationalized this idea that time continues to march forward despite our best efforts, but I guess I'd never really applied it to home. Not consciously. As if things would always be as they were. Perfect, unchanging, and forever. I had to wonder if I'd been applying look-back to certain people almost subconsciously, or the mythenness that proceeded to kick down the door of my fragile ignorance. But maybe, just maybe, somewhere in the soup of my brain. Maybe I've been drifting away for a long time, but I didn't realize it. I've mentioned that I always thought I would stay in my hometown. Maybe go to a university an hour away, and then when I graduate, move back and live out the rest of my existence there. It was comfortable. It was good. And it was what I wanted. At the time. And in truth, that really wasn't that long ago. But the more I think about it and reflect, I find myself quite separated from many of the things I thought were quite essential and core to me, like staying in one place my whole life. I think nothing stands out more than a quote from one of my previous thought pieces. That's why I keep moving. That's why I keep chasing, hoping beyond hope. That's why I'm giving it another shot. That's why I keep looking for somewhere to belong. Looking back, I think, in the midst of leaving so many different places in search of the next place, I didn't realize how distant I'd become from my home. Maybe that's not such a bad thing after all. In a few months' time, I'll be returning to one of the stops of my journey for my former roommate's wedding. I suspect that it'll be a little bit like my return to my hometown, because at one point, I saw the stop as somewhere I might be able to call home. The reality is that I only keep in touch with a small fraction of the people whom I once saw on a weekly basis and spent time with. Now, I find it nothing more than a footnote in the book of my life. But I'm sure there will be a lot to catch up on, for myself and others. There's just something about home. Even when you feel like you've left it behind for good and are living a life far away, separate, and even in a better place, there's just something about that word and its connotations. I think Buster and May would agree. Sometimes we can't imagine why the place we once called home holds such sway, even if there are bad memories attached. One of my good friends told me that home is a place where he would not have become himself if he hadn't lived life there. In that sense, perhaps I've had several homes. Each stop, after all, was an invaluable part of my journey. I can say with full confidence that I am not who I am today without each of my stops in the last few years. Home, and what I'd like it to look like, has been slowly changing as I've experienced much over the years. Drifting away implies that movement just unconsciously happened, as if I rode the wave without thinking. But I don't want that. I hold on to the memories I have of home, but perhaps for a long time, too long, I've been subconsciously letting my nostalgia and my memories get the better of me, trying to rebuild that feeling I once felt across all the places I hoped to call home. Home won't ever look the same. But it doesn't have to. And I don't think it should.